Welcome to today's presentation. Today, I'll be going over Administrative Guide Procedure 324.17, absent without leave, AWOL. Now, we're going to break this procedure down into two main parts. When a uniformed member of service is absent without leave, AWOL, for 2 hours at the beginning of the scheduled tour of duty. That's the first part of this procedure. And the second part will be when a uniformed member of service is absent without leave, AWOL, and they're not contacted 4 hours after the commencement of the tour. I'm going to set up a scenario that we're going to utilize throughout this procedure. You are the desk officer in the 81st Precinct. You're performing a 3rd platoon. And the patrol supervisor approaches you and says that your officer Yanisic is absent without leave. He is AWOL. He was supposed to be at roll call, and he's not there. We're going to discuss what the desk officer is going to be required to do in the first part when he's AWOL for 2 hours at the beginning of the scheduled tour of duty, and then what the desk officer is required to do at the 4-hour point when the uniformed member of service is AWOL and not contact 4 hours after the commencement of the tour. So there's two main parts to the procedure. That's the scenario we're going to use. So the procedure begins when a uniformed member of service is absent without leave, AWOL, for 2 hours at the beginning of the scheduled tour of duty, the first part. He's going to begin by making telephone inquiries, and they state including but not limited to these 4 telephone inquiries. So understand that yes, they tell you these are the telephone inquiries you're supposed to make, but you could also make any additional telephone inquiries that you would need to or want to. It's not limited to these telephone inquiries. So who will the desk officer make a telephone inquiry to? First, the command roll call. See, the command roll call personnel are the ones who makes roll call. Maybe they made a mistake and Yanisic was given the day off. You'll want to make a telephone inquiry to the command roll call and ask him. Next, the sick desk supervisor. Yanisic's not at roll call. He's supposed to be there. Maybe Yanisic called it sick, but forgot to call the command and let them know he reported sick. So you call the sick desk supervisor and say, hey, do you know where Yanisic is? Did he report sick? And then you'll make a telephone entry to the court signing rooms. Maybe Yanisic reported direct to court, and he didn't call the command to let him know that. So what do? You call, make a telephone inquiry to the court signing room. And lastly, the member's residence. Call Yanisic's house and find out where he is. Okay, he may answer the phone. He may not. But you make telephone inquiries to the command roll call, sick desk supervisor, court signing rooms, and the member's residence. But could you also possibly make the telephone inquiry to CCRB and see if he reported to CCRB? Yes, you can. You could call anyone you need to call to find out where Yanisic is. Next, the desk officer is going to check department records maintained at the command, including but not limited to. So now I tell you 2 specific records that you want to check, but you can check any department record to try to find out where Yanisic is. They say you will check the telephone record. Maybe he had to report to another agency, and that agency called and made an entry in the telephone record. So we check the telephone record. Maybe that will tell us where Yanisic is. And also the Central Personnel Resource to CPR roll call system. You're checking the CPR system to find out where the hell Yanisic is. Could you also check the command log? Sure. Could you also check the command diary? Absolutely. You could check any department record that you deem fit to try to find out where Yanisic is. You also make inquiries of command personnel as deemed necessary. Ask Officer Yanisic's partner, hey, man, where's your partner today? Where's Yanisic? He's supposed to be here. Or maybe other supervisors. Okay, maybe the neighbor coordination sergeant. Say, hey, Sarge, where's Yanisic? You know where he is? You will make inquiries with command personnel to try to find out where Yanisek is. That's the whole purpose of this. We're trying to find out where Yanisek is. Now, we might need to send somebody to his residence. But it's all going to depend upon, does he live in the city or does he live outside the city? Because we're going to take different actions for each. Let's first talk about when this member of the service resides in the city. Yanisek, we found out that Yanisek resides in a 105 precinct. So, because Yanisek lives in New York City, that desk officer will request that the desk officer in the member's resident precinct has a supervisor, yes, a supervisor, respond to the member's residence. So, the 81st precinct desk officer picks up the phone, calls the desk officer 105 and says, Yanisek, he's AWOL, he's absent without leave, we're looking for him. Can you send a supervisor to his residence? Now, I emphasize the word supervisor, just in case that Yanisek is at home and the sergeant, the supervisor, knocks on the door and Yanisek comes to the door with a crack pipe in his mouth. The supervisor says, I got you. Okay, we have a supervisor in the position to observe him with the crack pipe in his mouth. Again, I emphasize the fact that that desk officer of his residence precinct will send a supervisor to check on Yanisek's residence. But now we have the second situation. What happens if he does not reside in New York City? So I got a little pop quiz for you. What if the member of the service resides outside New York City? Well, in that scenario, we can't call the desk officer where he resides outside the city. So who are we going to have to call so that they can send the police to Yanisek's residence? The Inter-City Correspondence Unit, the ICCU. If the member resides outside New York City, the desk officer is required to request the Inter-City Correspondence Unit to make the notification to the local law enforcement authority concerned and request that they respond to the member's residence. So we find out Yanisek resided in Suffolk County. We can't call his resident precinct because he resides outside the city. So we're going to call the Intercity Correspondence Unit, and they will call the Suffolk County Police Department so that the Suffolk County Police Department can send somebody to his residence to check on Yanisek. So be careful, depending upon where this individual lives, depend upon how his residence will be visited. And there it is. We know everything the desk officer is required to do when a member services AWOL for 2 hours at the beginning of the scheduled tour. Now we got to hit the 4-hour mark. We have to know if a member is not contacted 4 hours after the commencement of the tour. So if your tour was supposed to start at 0700 hours and it's now 1100 hours, we hit the 4-hour mark. If you're supposed to start at 1500 hours and it's now 1900 hours, we hit the 4-hour mark. If you were supposed to start at 2315 hours and it's now 0315 hours, we hit the 4-hour mark. What do you have to do when you hit that 4-hour mark? Well, the desk officer, he is going to have to make notifications and document those notifications in the command log. Because at this point, you're going to take this job looking for Officer Yanisek, and we're going to give it to the commanding officer duty captain, who will be responsible to investigate. So, 4 notifications required to be made at the 4-hour mark. Now be careful. Lots of promotional exam questions mixing up the duties of the desk officer in that 2-hour mark and the duties of the desk officer at that 4-hour mark. So, at the 4-hour mark, the desk officer will notify the commanding officer duty captain. And that is the most important notification to make. Why? Because the commanding officer duty captain is going to be responsible to investigate this incident at the 4-hour mark. He's got to investigate where the hell Yanisek is. And the desk officer will notify the borough commander counterpart. Hey, I just want to let you know, Yanisek's AWOL. It's been 4 hours, we can't find him. call up IAB Command Center. Hey, IAB Command Center, Yanissek's AWOL. We've been looking for him for the last 4 hours. And the Operations Unit. Operations Unit, Yanissek's AWOL. He's been gone for 4 hours. But be careful of that last notification. Because in addition to notifying the Operations Unit, you must include the actions taken to locate the member. Yeah, Operations Unit, I made telephone inquiries. I checked department records. I conferred with command personnel. And I can't find him. I even, because he lived in the city, called the member's resident precinct and had them send a supervisor to his residence and he wasn't home. Or if he was outside the city, I called the Intercity Correspondence Unit because he resided outside the city and they sent local police to his residence. You're going to let the Operations Unit know of all the actions taken to locate the member. And the last duty the desk officer is going to be to document. You will make a command log entry including the facts and the notifications. You're going to write down all the facts and everyone you notified. Who'd you notify? At the 4-hour point, you notified the commanding officer duty captain, right in the command log. You notified the borough command/counterpart, write it down in the command log. You notified the IAB Command Center, write it down in the command log. You notified the Operations Unit, write it down in the command log. And there it is. If you're studying for the sergeant exam or studying for the lieutenant exam, you're done. You could turn off this video right now because we covered everything you need to know for the sergeant's exam and the lieutenant's exam. But we're not done. We have captain's duties. I always recommend that if you're studying for sergeant's exam or lieutenant's exam, when you get to captain's duties, you don't study them. You listen to it so you understand the procedure as a whole, to better understand the procedure as a whole. But understand you're not getting questions on captain's duties for a sergeant's exam or lieutenant's exam. But to better understand the procedure as a whole, just listen to the remaining duties. And if you're not comfortable with that, shut it off. So now we got to talk about the duties of the commanding officer duty captain. We know at the 4-hour point that the desk officer notified the commanding officer duty captain. Now the commanding officer duty captain has to conduct an immediate investigation. It's his job now. Desk officer handed it to him at the 4-hour mark, and now he will conduct an immediate investigation. And he's got to telephone the results of the investigation to the Operations Unit. Be very careful there. The Operations Unit wants to know the results of your investigation. So you, the commanding officer duty captain, will call him up and let him know. And you also have to document the results of your investigation. You will enter the results of the investigation in the command log. In the command log. Now, we only have one other duty of the commanding officer duty captain when he's investigating an AWOL uniform member of service. We know he conducts an immediate investigation. We know he's going to have to telephone the results of the investigation to the Operations Unit. And we know he's going to document his investigation in the command log. He now also has to prepare a report on typed letterhead. And in that report, it will include full particulars of the investigation. It will include the results obtained. And it will include the actions taken or contemplated. So you're going to take a typed letterhead and put down all the particulars, put down the results, and put down your actions taken and contemplated. Now, that's it. Those are all the duties of the commanding officer and the duty captain when you investigate an AWOL uniform member of service. We just have to now finish off with how we distribute that typed letterhead we just prepared for this individual who is AWOL. Because if you're the commanding officer of that member, if you're the commanding officer of Officer Yanissek, you will prepare 2 copies of that report on typed letterhead. But what happens if you are not Officer Yanissek's commanding officer? You're the duty captain. You're not the commanding officer of the member who is absent without leave. In that scenario, you have to prepare 3 copies. If the member's commanding officer is not performing duty, the duty captain will prepare 3 copies of the report. Commanding officer, 2 copies. Duty captain, 3 copies. Now, if you read the distribution of this type letterhead in the patrol guide in words, it gets a little confusing. When you break it down visually, it's very easy, and that's exactly what I've done for you. So, the commanding officer, we said he prepares 2 copies of that type letterhead. Where's the original and the copy go to? Well, he's going to forward the original copy to the chief of department without delay and done directly. Look at the graphic. Type letterhead, chief of department, direct. That's where the original goes. And the duplicate copy, it also goes to the chief of department, but it goes through channels. Through channels. That means the command sends it to the borough sends it to the chief of patrol's office, and so on. It goes through channels to the chief of department. Very easy. Why? Commanding officer, 2 copies. Why? One goes direct to the chief of department, one goes through channels to the chief of department. And that is if the commanding officer of that member prepared the report. But what happens if the commanding officer of that member is not working and the duty captain is handling this AWOL uniform member of service? We have to prepare 3 copies. Why? Because the original is still going direct and without delay to the chief of department. But the remaining 2 copies are going to be sent to the commanding officer of that member. That's right. We send 2 copies to the member's commanding officer, because that member's commanding officer will then be required to file 1 copy and endorse the copy that was prepared by the duty captain and forward it to the chief of department through channels. Look at it visually. It makes it a lot easier to understand the distribution of that type letterhead. There it is. We know how to investigate an absent without leave uniform member of service. Now we got to talk about what happens when this uniform member of service is located. We find Officer Yanisek. First thing to be aware of is that it's only captain's duties here. Desk officer, when you find him, do you have to do anything? Nope. The commanding officer duty captain has all the duties in this part of the procedure. We find Officer Yanisek, commanding officer duty captain will interview the member concerned, ascertain the reason for and location during absence. Yanisek, what happened? Where the hell were you? You're going to ask him, where has he been? Now, this officer may have a real problem if he's been gone for the entire tour. Oh yeah, real problem. Members absent without leave for the entire tour will not be assigned to duty without the permission of the chief of department. See, he's gone for the entire tour. Prior to putting him back to duty, the chief of department, you need his permission first. Okay, so that's why I say there might be a problem if he's been gone for the entire tour. The commanding officer duty captain also has to make notifications. We know when that uniform member of service was gone at the 4-hour point, the desk officer had to notify the operations unit, the borough command, and IB command center. Now, when we find this individual, the captain, the commanding officer duty captain, has to let the operations unit know. Yeah, operations unit, yeah, I found Officer Yanisek. Yeah, the desk officer notified you before that he was missing at the 4-hour point, and now I found him. Same thing with the borough command. Hey, borough command, I found Officer Yanisek. And same thing with the IB command center. Hey, IB command center, yeah, I found Officer Yanisek. Yeah, the desk officer told you originally at the 4-hour point, and now I found him. The problem is with the last notification. The last notification makes no sense at all. Why? It says that commanding officer duty captain, when you find this member of the service, will notify the sick desk supervisor. When you, the commanding officer duty captain, call the sick desk supervisor and say, hey, Yanisek was AWOL, we found him. He's going to say, oh, okay, I guess that's okay, because no one ever told me he was missing. Because no one ever notified the sick desk supervisor that he was missing. The desk officer, that's not one of the notifications the desk officer is required to make. So that last notification is a bit strange. So be careful about that. CO duty captain, when you find this uniform member of service, let the operations unit, borough command, IAB, and the sick desk supervisor know you found them. And you will make a command log entry that you found Officer Yanisic. And do you have to write another report? What they call a supplemental report? Yes. You prepare a supplementary report on type letterhead to the Chief of Department, including the facts and disciplinary action taken, not previously reported. So we had an original type letterhead prepared when we conducted an investigation looking for him. And now that we found him, we have to prepare this supplementary report. The question is now, we prepared the supplementary report, who is going to get it? Who are we required to forward it to? Well, it's forwarded the exact same way the original and the copies of that type letterhead that we prepared about the investigation of this missing uniformed member service was forwarded. So this is really a review. You prepared the original type letterhead of the missing, the AWOL uniformed member service, and now a supplementary. When we find him, it's forwarded the same way. If the commanding officer is preparing that supplementary report, he's going to forward that supplementary type letterhead to the Chief of Department direct, and a copy is going to go to the Chief of Department through channels. And if it's the duty captain prepared supplementary type letterhead, well, he's going to send the original direct to the Chief of Department and 2 copies to the commanding officer of the member. And that commanding officer of the member will file a copy, and the commanding officer of that member will endorse it and forward it to the Chief of Department through channels. And there it is. There's your distribution. There it is, 324.17, absent without leave. It was put into effect on November 16th of 2022 by revision order number 112 of 22. My name's Mike Yanisic. You have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me at mike@elitestrategictraining.com, or you could email my son Connor at connor@elitestrategictraining.com, or call us at 516-761-9101. Keep studying, stay focused, and stay motivated. Until next time.